presentation by Gabriel de Lucio Urzúa, who is an international relations student with a strong passion for environmental and urban issues. And he has participated in international negotiation models. And currently he is pursuing his internship at the National Banking and Securities Commission. And his presentation is titled "The Alliance of Small Island States: Actions Against Climate Change." So now I am giving the floor to Gabriel, and I am very excited about his presentation.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. It's an honor for me to be here at this moment. And yes, she have already mentioned, I am an international relations student. I'm deeply passionate about climate change. And I would like you guys to share with this presentation with you because I think it's a very interesting topic and we could say that it's like an spoiler of what could happen to the rest of the earth if we don't share actions. But also this is very important because this will show how some countries have organized themselves in order to fight climate change. So yeah, it will be a very interesting presentation, I hope, for you guys. So let's begin with Lara. But in order to put ourselves in context with this problem that these island states are facing because climate change, why is climate change so important for these countries? Well, I think this video in the beginning of the presentation will give you a general panorama. So let's begin, shall we?
I'm sorry, Lucy. I think we are not able to hear
Oh, really?
the
Oh,
video.
no. But can you at least read the subtitles?
It has subtitles. The video has subtitles.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, we are able to see the subtitles. Thank you.
Okay, well, I will begin again, just
Okay.
to be sure, because I think that if I try to maybe to to synchronize the audio, it might take some time.
Oh,
So,
okay. Thank you very
okay,
much.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so yeah, as you could see, um, these countries, especially low-lying countries, are very exposed to climate change. And literally, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Tuvalu was there in the beach that probably wouldn't exist anymore in the future. So it shows how important is this fight against climate change and the real consequences that this could have. That literally some of these countries that I will talk about could literally disappear, face out of the map if we don't do anything about this. But they have done a lot of stuff that I think it's very important to share and to acknowledge because they have they have really carried about a very strong fight against climate change. So in this presentation in general, I will talk about sea level rise, why does this happen, what are the causes, and what are the possible consequences this could bring. Also, I would like to share like the situation of these countries, and this will lead me to talk about some concept that is very important, I think, in the actual debate, that is climate justice, because unfortunately, many of these countries, they will suffer climate change in a very hard way, and there are some of the countries that have emitted less greenhouse gas emissions in history. So this can talk about about the inequality of the climate impacts across the globe. And I will also share how what actions have these countries have already made, what actions are they doing in the internal affairs and the foreign affairs, and how their stories can inspire us to fight against this climatic situation that we are living at this moment. So this is like a little uh, thing of the topics that I will abord in this presentation: climate change and sea level rise, the small island developing states, and their actions against climate change. So let's begin. So what is sea level rise? Well, sea level rise is basically well, this will be pretty obvious, but when the sea level rise. But why does this happen? What is this happening, and how much this is happening? Well, in the last couple of years, the sea level rise has been growing in a very significant way, because sea level rise is a thing that it has already existed before humanity, but this was in a very moderated pace. But now this has changed a lot. Since 1880, the average sea levels have swelled over 23 centimeters, with about half of these centimeters gained in the last 30 years. So this talks about this how fast is the current pace that we are living at this moment. And unfortunately, it's expected to keep growing even more. According to the panel on climate change, experts says that we can expect the oceans to rise between 26 and 77 centimeters by 2100, with temperatures warming 1.5 the ocean temperature, and it could seriously affect many coastal cities, not only from small island states, even though from very big countries. And I will show you a map to exemplify this later. But let's continue exploring sea level rise. But why does sea level rise happen? Well, it's very related with climate change, but how is this related to climate change? Well, there are two main reasons. The first one is water thermal expansion. And I won't get a lot into detail because, as you may already seen, I am not a physicist, and I'm not the most expert voice in this topic. But in general, when the temperature rises, the water needs more space. It occupies more space. So as the water gets warmer, the water occupies more space in the ocean generally, which led us to the sea level rise. And this is about half of the reasons is like very 50-50. And also the other reason that is probably the most known one, it's that the melting ice sheets and glaciers. As we already know, most of us, the Arctic and the Antarctica and Greenland are currently melting. And when these glaciers and ice sheets melt, well, the ice melts and there's more water then. So yeah. So they are basically the two main reasons about why this is happening, why sea level is rising. But what are the possible consequences that this could have? Well, probably the most obvious one is floodings, because if the sea level rise, the possibilities of floodings considerably also get higher. And this could be a problem for a lot of countries, because it could damage the current infrastructure and also could difficult the access to drinkable water, because if the water from the sea comes into, for example, some lakes, some rivers, this could contaminate the water and make it not drinkable to consume. So yeah, and also agricultural soil could be damaged, especially with contamination of salt from the seawater. And this could also harm the economy of a lot of these countries and could make the life in these countries very hard. And probably the most worrying one and the most obvious one or the most evident one is that literally there are some countries that could literally disappear off the map if we don't do something. And I have here 4 examples of countries that could literally disappear in the next few years. The first one is the Maldives. The Maldives is currently the lowest lying country in the world, so it's expected to maybe disappear in the future 40 years, and which is obviously a super bad situation. And we also have countries like Kiribati, which is actually considered the country with most possibilities of disappearing in the next few years. And it is expected that in the next 10 years or 15 years, this country could literally disappear. So yeah. And also we have Tuvalu, which is the country from the minister that spoke at the beginning of this presentation. And we also have a country like Vanuatu, which is also vulnerable to climate change, but in a different way. And it is like this country is very exposed to hurricanes and all of these hazards. So, the climate change, the vulnerabilities that it poses, it can vary in different ways. But they are all important and they are all very dangerous for these nations. And I don't want you to get this perception that, oh, this will be just a problem that will affect some islands and yeah, the rest of the world will be all right. Well, not actually, because as you can see in this map, this could be the number of people per country living on land expected to be under sea level by 2100. And we can see that there's a lot of people. There are countries that have even between 10 and 50 million people that could be displaced because of this. And especially in Asia, I think it will be the most vulnerable region to this happening. Like in countries like China, India, or Vietnam, or Indonesia, that are very low-lying countries, and this could lead to multiple problems. But I like this map, but I also don't like this map because I think it is not shown like the situation of a lot of these little countries, of little island states, because they have basically a small population. So technically, there wouldn't be a lot of people affected by this problem, but they are literally the entirety of the country living this danger. So yeah. But going back to these countries, what are these countries? Why are these countries more vulnerable to climate change? Well, the United Nations recognized these countries as highly vulnerable because of some characteristics that they all have in common. Because as I will show you that, well, I will make a little sneak peek that these countries are all around the world. They don't have have very different situations, but they share common problems. The most evident one are the geographical situation that they are. Well, they are coastal nations that are very close to the sea, and that are because of this they are exposed to the ocean and all the hazards that are associated with the ocean. We have problems like sea level rise, tropical cyclones, marine heat waves, and ocean acidification. And all of these problems can affect these countries in a very particular way. For example, ocean acidification. Well, ocean acidification is closely related to the damage of the coral reef, of the coral reef. And for example, many of these countries are relying on fishing. And if they're relying on fishing and ocean acidification keeps going on, they could get lost a very economical sector for them. Or tropical cyclones, literally, that there are a lot of cyclones that could literally wipe out these countries because they are very little. And also we have these geographical problems, we also have economical problems that makes these countries more vulnerable because most of these countries are developing nations. I mean, they don't have a lot of resources and their economies are very relying on environmental conditions. For example, many of these countries have in common three economical activities like tourism, fishing, and agriculture. And all of these three are super vulnerable to climate change. For example, tourism can be affected by cyclones. If there's a cyclone, probably I don't know, a lot of people would like to go there. Or for example, ocean acidification, which makes the coral white. Probably there are a lot of people that wouldn't go to these countries if they don't can scuba dive. Or we also have the fishing, as I already explained, and agriculture, which is closely related to possible floodings that could harm the the economic situation of these countries. So yeah, these countries are very vulnerable because of this, and also because they could literally disappear in the next countries. But probably before they disappear, the life in these countries could get worse every minute. And even though they don't completely disappear, many of these people will have to leave these islands. And we can see that these countries are situated in basically three main regions. With first of all, the Caribbean, with countries like Saint Lucia, Saint Kitts and Nevis, and a lot of more countries there. We also have countries in the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean, which you can see in the screen at this moment. And we also have a lot of countries in the Pacific Ocean, most of them very small island nations. And some of them are atolls, which atolls, as you know, they are these countries that are super, super flat. And this makes them super vulnerable to sea level rise and all this stuff. So what are these countries doing in order to fight against this situation, to adapt to the situation also? Because as we know, when we talk about climate change, we can talk about mitigation and adapting. Mitigation is what can we do to reduce the impact, and adaptation is what we will do once this impact is already going on. But the main focus currently of these countries is mitigation. Most of these countries have already a very ambitious goal to go to achieve carbon neutrality in the future, and have very very elaborated plans, and also they don't even emit a lot of greenhouse emissions. But even though they don't do this a lot, they are trying to improve and trying to cut the main thing that is causing um, greenhouse emissions of these countries, that is energy. Because as we can see, in an island, there's not a lot of energetical resources. So they need to import their energy, most of it, because with boats carrying some oil, and they are trying to invest then heavily on renewable energies. And they're doing a nice job, but unfortunately, even if every country in this region goes carbon neutral, they are super good with the environment. Probably this wouldn't even be enough, because these countries are very little and they don't represent almost anything from the global greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, unfortunately, they are in a very tough situation that led some countries to get ready for the worst. There are some countries that are considering migration later, climate-induced migration, even though they don't like it and they don't want it, because they see this as like a last resource, because they have lived in these countries for all their lives. They have the culture there, and they really don't want to get out of their islands. But probably they will need to do it if this tendency keeps going the way it has been. And this led us to talk about climate justice, because these countries, even though they don't pollute almost anything, if they are expected to have contributed less than 1% to the global world's greenhouse gas emissions, nothing, and they nonetheless will be some of the countries that will suffer the most climate change. And in order to see this, I would like to show you some websites that I found in order to show some data. So let's see. Well, in this website, we can see the chart of world top 10 emitters at this moment. And we have that basically the biggest countries are the ones that are polluting the most, and most especially the richest countries in this situation. We have countries like China, the United States, India, the EU, Russia, Japan, Brazil, Indonesia, Iran, Canada, which are the top 10 most biggest emitters. And as you can see, they represent almost two-thirds of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And probably the little island nation will be over here because they don't have any significant pollution. And it's very unfair that these countries will suffer the most, even though all these countries are the ones that are polluting the more in the biggest quantity. So yeah. I also have like a more historical base because currently I think in the media it's shown that the biggest polluter at this moment might be countries that are developing, right? Like China or India or countries like this. And this is true. They are actually emitting a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. But to be honest, if we see this is in a historical perspective, because this is not a thing that it's just begun at this moment. This is a thing that this has been going on since the Industrial Revolution. And in this historical perspective, we have that the table changes, and then the biggest greenhouse gas emitter historically it's the USA and Europe basically, and they have been the countries that have emitted more greenhouse gas emissions, and this led us to think that maybe these countries have a responsibility about what will happen to them, to the island nations, because they have basically made this situation happen to them. And these island countries will not benefit at all about the things that are going on at this moment. So there should be a change. For example, in this chart, we can see that the island nations, for example, of Oceania, have contributed like even less than 1% because the country that has emitted more greenhouse gas emissions in Oceania is just basically Australia, and there's a New Zealand, and then we have all the rest of the countries in this tiny dot over here. So yeah. So let's get back to the slides and let's continue. So, well, this situation led to a lot of countries to form an alliance, to rally in a organization to look for their interests. Because as we have already seen, these countries will need to do something about climate change. And sadly, probably doing things within their borders won't be enough because they don't represent almost nothing of the actual problem. And in order to stop this problem, they will need to talk to other nations and get to agreements to fight climate change and to make these powerful nations and the biggest nations in the world to make changes in order to save these little island countries. And in this context, we have that in 1990, the Alliance of Small Island States was born, and it's basically a coalition and a group of negotiation in important United Nations conferences about the climate change. And their primary goal is to amplify their voices of, of the about the current situation about the current climatic crisis that we are living at this moment. Because probably if the just one country starts talking about this problem, probably they won't be heard. But if all these countries get together, their voice will be stronger, and they will have a possibility to change this. And in order to do this, these countries have needed to make a common discourse, which is very difficult. Imagine agreeing in something with another 39 countries in the globe. This is crazy, but these countries have made a lot of stuff. They have done a lot, and uh, they have achieved to unify their voice and to rally in the same discourse with the same diplomacy. And this is basically why these countries have made a lot of impact in the world. Because I wanted to talk about these countries because they have done a lot of things to change climate change, to fight against this. They have participated in a lot of United Climate Change conferences, and they have collected a lot of successes that we will see later in this presentation. But let's first begin with how many of these countries are. Approximately, there are 390 global states that form AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS, we can say. And yeah, but even though there are 39 countries together, they don't even they don't even make 65, they just make 65 million people, which is like probably the population of the UK or France. But these are 39 countries, and it's not even like France or the UK are huge countries. They are big countries, yeah, but there are a lot of bigger countries. So this talks about us that how little of people there are in these countries, but how powerful they have become with their willing to change the current situation. So they have unified and they have collected a lot of successes. But what are these successes? Well, the first of these successes is probably the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is basically for international environmental policy. This is like probably the biggest international treaty that has ever made in this situation, because this has basically shaped how we talk about international policy in the current day. It has established what are the concepts like mitigation or adaptation or losses. And this has also shaped how the global works at this moment. For example, in this framework, with it's stated that there will be happening the conferences of the parties that are the most important forum to talk about climate change, the COPs. These COPs began because of this document, the framework of United Nations on climate change. And the small island countries participated in the formation of these frameworks. They had a lot of how can we say this? They had a lot of participation, and they were a very big important actor in the negotiations, and they emphasized it to include the issues that they were living and to be recognized that they are facing special vulnerabilities that no other part in the world will face, and with this violence. So they have really stated their situation in this document. And also this documented for to you guys to see how important it is. It also led eventually to the Kyoto Protocol, which is also a very important treaty that you probably may have already heard about. So yeah, these countries basically push this, and there are some experts that they say that probably if there wasn't for the impulse that these countries gave, probably this wouldn't even have happened. So yeah, and probably the biggest success that has happened because of the actions of these countries is the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was this treaty that was accorded in the Conference of Parties that happened in Paris, the COP21, and these countries their goals were reflected in this treaty, and the AOSIS has made a big campaign about 1.5 degrees to stay alive. What is this talk about? Well, as you may already know, in the Paris Agreement, the main goal or how can we say? Well, the main goal was to set a goal of the temperature that we can just that we can that it would be ideal to maintain of the global temperature warming. And in order to stop the global warming, it would be very helpful, or it would be ideal to keep this level of warming below 1.5 degrees. In this conference, the goal was that the the minimum would be 2 degrees, but the ideal would be 1.5 degrees. And probably this wouldn't have been possible without the participation of AOSIS countries, because they were one of the countries that were pushing the most about this being made. They had a big participation, and fortunately, their voices were heard, and this was included in the document. And they also include in this document something that's very important. It's loss and damage. Loss and damage is basically when I talk about you guys about the actions that they are planning to do if the worst happens. Well, this is basically loss and damage. Having a plan when the worst thing happens, that we don't want that to happen, but we need to be ready if that happens. And and acting about loss and damage includes some activities like, for example, including funds to fight against climate change, that if there's like a huge natural disaster happening, these countries have like some economical support to rebuild their countries. Well, this is loss and damage. And for example, in the last COP conference, the main agreement was that the international fund of climate change will be made. And this is also probably because of the efforts of the small island states in this international diplomacy. But unfortunately, they still face some challenges, even though the Paris Agreement was a big milestone. There are some things that these countries have need to keep doing. And for example, one of them could be strengthening coalitions, because in the international negotiations of climate change, there are some other groups that represent their own interests. For example, there is the group of the least developed countries, and this is a potential group which the small islands states could make an alliance, because they also have like some common issues, and they could fight by under the discourse of climate justice, because climate justice is a very strong argument that these countries have posed in order to achieve their goals in climate policies, because they try to show these countries that they are the ones that are suffering the most without even doing the most part of the damage. So there's some responsibility that these countries should do in order to make climate justice with these countries. And this opportunity to strengthen coalitions could be made, so there could be more countries fighting for these problems. But this also leads us to a problem that is maintaining unity. Because if there are a lot of countries in this bloc that have some different interests, their voice could be fragmented, and this won't be useful in negotiations. For example, if there's some country that has a lot of jungle that wants to fight about the deforestation, they could stick these goals in deforestation, but probably most of these nations don't have this problem in a very strong way, because they have more biggest problems, like, so for example, sea level rise. And if this country starts talking about this and this country starts talking about this, their unity could be divided, and this would be very harmful, and we don't want that to happen. So yeah, that is a challenge that these countries have. And it's super difficult to achieve this, because there are 39 countries with different perspectives of the world. And the fact that they have managed to do this shows a lot of commitment and cooperation that these countries have made, becoming an example for all humanity. So, but also another challenge they are continuing to facing at this moment is to maintain the pressure for implementation. Because these policies, for example, the Paris Agreement has been achieved, right? But in order to do it, to make it come true, we need to keep pressuring for the implementation, because unfortunately, probably the Paris Agreement won't be even a reality, because a lot of countries haven't made the enough efforts in order to make it. And these countries need to keep pushing about how these countries, the rest of the world, can do in order to achieve these goals, and to make pressure to keep this pressure going on and achieving their goals immediately. And unfortunately, the last big important challenge that these countries are facing is literally facing immediate consequences, because even though it's very important to look for the future and to look for the climate change policies to change, they're already living the consequences. Most of these countries are already facing sea level rise in some degree. There are some countries that have lost some tiny little islands because of this. There are countries that are living a lot of flooding, of a lot of hurricanes and cyclones going on, and they unfortunately need already to face these consequences and to do plans to adapt into these situations. But what is like the current panorama of the international environmental negotiations? Well, in the last COP28 that was held in Baku, in Azerbaijan, these countries were very unsatisfied with the result, because these countries had been pushing as a way of achieving as a way of pressuring for the goals. They have looked for to fossil fuels to not be considered a part of the plan of achieving eventual how can we say this, of eventual less than 1.5 degrees warming, because as we know, fossil fuels contribute a lot in greenhouse gas emissions, and we need to do something about this. And these countries have said, you need to stop considering fossil fuels as an alternative in order to achieve the Paris Agreement. And if you don't do this, well, probably you won't even make it. And these countries have pushed to fossil fuels to be not considered for the phase out phase. And unfortunately, they submitted in this conference a draft document which stated that which stated that oh which stated that this is not a viable solution to achieve this. So they would need to stop looking for a new approach. And these countries are pushing to in the new documents of climate change to show how this eventual phase out will happen, how these countries will slowly need to leave fossil fuels, and this wasn't achieved in this conference. And they didn't want to, and as a consequence of this, they didn't want to sign the draft document because they literally said the Cedric Schuster, which is the AOSIS president at this moment and president and minister of Samoa, he literally said, "We will not sign our death warrant. We cannot sign a text that does not include firm commitments on the phase out of fossil fuels." So yeah, and these countries also, they are getting kind of frustrated because they have done a lot of efforts. They participate in every climate change conference. They always talk about how this is big for them, and they are not being heard. Even though they have achieved some goals, they have not, they haven't been able to achieve all the goals that they have proposed because of the other nations all around the world. And this is a very sad situation, but it's currently the one that we are living at this moment. And probably in the next COP that will be in just a few weeks or days, I think, this will be a very important topic in this new conference. Probably the phase out of fossil fuels will be an essential part of this. So if you want to be like watching these conferences, this will be a very interesting and important topic. But as a conclusion, I don't want you guys to think, oh, this country is poor of them. They are suffering a lot and they are just victims of this. And yeah, this is true. They are victims and probably they don't deserve anything of this are happening, but they are also strong and resilient. They have made a lot of efforts to fight climate change. They have done a lot of stuff to achieve their goals. And they are very resilient, even though it doesn't seem with this current situation. Because generally, the island life, living in an island, it's tough. They have to do a lot of things, they have to adapt, and they are already facing the consequence. And even though all these problems, they are still there, and they are still fighting for their futures, and they are seeking climate justice, which is a very important thing else that we need to consider in the next few years, and something that will be fundamental in the climate discourse in the future years. And it shows how some countries, even though they are literally some tiny dots in the map with less than 65 million people between 39 countries, they have made a lot, they have pushed a lot of the most important international policy documents like the Paris Agreement or the Kyoto Protocol. And this shows how if we stay together and we find our strengths, we can achieve big goals like the ones that they have already made. So this will be everything for this presentation. I share with you guys my references at the end of these videos. You can already see them. It was a pleasure to be here. And it was an honor for me to be here in this presentation. So thank you so much for being here and to pay attention. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Yeah, I think it's a very brilliant presentation, and it's a very interesting topic to know more about those countries who are suffering the consequences of climate change. I would like to know if somebody in the audience has some questions. I have a question, Gabriel. Do you know
All right.
about the migration of those countries? I mean, are there many people from those countries that are already migrating for climate change reasons?
Well, at this moment, currently, it's more like internal migration within these countries. Unfortunately, this already, even though this has been a problem, at least they can at least move to another regions of the country. A lot of these countries have already been planning some plans to move their population um, to higher ground in the same islands. And yeah, this has been I think going on already. But there are some countries that are very low lying, that they will need to do something about this or they will just really disappear. And some countries are even now signing agreements with other countries in order to move to move their population when this happens. For example, we have Tuvalu that has already signed an agreement with Fiji, that is an island that is very close to them, but at least they have a little bit more high lying, and they have made already an agreement to move part of the population when this happens eventually, because eventually this will happen, and probably it will be not like, oh, this country disappeared just now. It would be a slowly half of the life conditions in these countries that will relate to a small decline of the population. So yeah, unfortunately, this is a thing already going on. At least at this moment, it's just local, but this could be international in a few decades or years. So yeah, that's the current situation.
Yeah, I think so. And one question is, if just Fiji the only country who have offered some help in this topic?
I think Australia has done some things, because Australia has like a responsibility with these countries, because some of them are very closely related to Australia, but mainly the Pacific ones. And also because Australia has been a big emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. So I think they have some negotiations, but I think the only formal one is with Fiji. So, well, it will be an interesting topic to see what are the preparation for this to happen. But as far as I know, these are the only countries that have already signed some deals. But yeah, this could be very important, because we could literally have like a wave of climate refugees because of this situation, and it would be an important thing, and also in a jurisdictional approach to pay attention about. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. There is somebody there who has some question, some comment. Well, I guess maybe we can close this forum. Thank you so much, Gabriel. It's a very interesting topic, and I think we have to take it. We should not leave it for granted. Thank you so much. Then, Selena, would you like to add something?
No, thank you very much. It was a very meaningful presentation, and it was really good to learn about those countries. I think we don't really talk enough about this, and it was really eye-opening for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gabriel.
Thank you so much. It was an honor for me to be here. And thank you for sharing this space in order to share my ideas with you guys. It's very meaningful. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's more for us. Thank you so much. So thanks to everyone for joining this, our first forum of environment and climate change. Yeah, we hope to have you again next year, Gabriel. Yes,
Yeah, it would be very nice. I will keep an eye on the possible next forum.
yeah, thank you so much. But thank you guys, and you have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Gabriel.
Bye bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you. You